The ancient walls of Eldoria Castle had witnessed many storms throughout the centuries, but none quite like the brewing tempest that threatened to tear apart the royal family from within. Princess Isabella stood at the tall window of the east wing, watching the morning mist roll across the castle grounds, unaware that this day would change everything she thought she knew about her family. At 12 years old, Isabella possessed the kind of quiet wisdom that often surprised the adults around her. Her younger brother, Prince Alexander, age 9, was currently in the library with their tutor, probably asking a million questions about everything from astronomy to ancient history. The two siblings had always been close, finding comfort in each other's company amid the formal protocols and endless responsibilities that came with their royal status. Their father, Crown Prince Edmund, had been preparing for his eventual reign his entire life. At 38, he carried himself with the dignity expected of the future king, but those who knew him well could see the weight of responsibility in his tired eyes. He genuinely cared about the people of Eldoria and spent countless hours studying policies and meeting with advisors to ensure he would be ready when the time came. Princess Catherine, Edmund's wife and the children's mother, had transformed from a commoner into one of the most beloved members of the royal family. Her genuine warmth and dedication to charitable causes had won the hearts of the people of Eldoria. She had a natural way of making everyone feel comfortable, whether she was speaking with world leaders or chatting with children at a local school. The tension in the castle had been building for months, ever since Queen Regent Cordelia had begun making more aggressive moves to secure her position. King Harold, Edmund's father, had passed away 2 years earlier, leaving a complicated succession situation. According to royal law, Edmund would become king on his 40th birthday, but until then, Cordelia served as regent, wielding considerable power. Cordelia had married King Harold late in life, after his first wife, Edmund's mother, Queen Margaret, had died in a tragic accident. While the marriage had been arranged for political reasons, Cordelia had genuinely cared for Harold. However, her relationship with Edmund and his family had always been strained. She felt like an outsider, constantly fighting to prove her legitimacy and worth. The morning started like any other, with the family gathering for breakfast in the smaller dining room they preferred for casual meals. The children chattered about their upcoming lessons while Catherine reviewed her schedule for the day, which included a visit to the new children's hospital in the capital city. Edmund was reading through several official documents when a servant approached with a message that would set everything in motion. The envelope bore the royal seal indicating it was an urgent matter requiring immediate attention. As Edmund read the contents, his face grew pale. "What is it?" Catherine asked, noticing her husband's expression. Edmund looked up, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. "It's from the Royal Council. They're calling an emergency session this afternoon to discuss concerns about the current leadership transition." The implications were clear to everyone at the table. This wasn't just a routine meeting. Someone was challenging Edmund's right to the throne, and they all suspected they knew who was behind it. "But you're the rightful heir," Isabella said, her young voice filled with confusion and worry. "Grandfather always said you would be king." Edmund reached over to squeeze his daughter's hand. "That's right, sweetheart, and nothing is going to change that." But even as he spoke these reassuring words, Edmund felt a chill of uncertainty. Politics within the royal family could be treacherous, and he knew that Cordelia had been working behind the scenes, building alliances and gathering support from various nobles and council members. Catherine excused herself early from breakfast, claiming she needed to make some calls about her hospital visit. But Edmund knew she was going to reach out to their allies. They had always been a team, facing challenges together, and this would be no different. The children sensed the tension, even though their parents tried to shield them from the adult concerns. Alexander abandoned his usual enthusiastic discussion of his science experiments, while Isabella found herself unable to concentrate on her music lesson later that morning. As the day progressed, whispers filled the castle corridors. Servants exchanged worried glances, and even the usually cheerful gardeners working outside seemed subdued. Word had somehow leaked about the emergency council meeting, and everyone knew that major changes might be coming. Edmund spent the morning in his private study, making calls and meeting with trusted advisors. Sir James Whitmore, his longtime friend and counselor, arrived before noon with a grim expression. "The situation is more serious than we initially thought," Sir James reported. "Cordelia has been meeting with Lord Blackwood and several other council members. They're claiming that your recent decisions show you're not ready for the responsibility of the crown. What decisions? Edmund asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Your support for the new education reforms, the environmental protection initiatives, and especially your stance on opening the borders to refugees from the neighboring conflict. They're painting you as too progressive, too willing to spend the treasury on what they call unnecessary projects. Edmund felt his anger rising. Every policy he had supported was carefully researched and designed to help the people of Eldoria. The education reforms would give children from all backgrounds better opportunities. The environmental initiatives would protect the kingdom's natural resources for future generations. And helping refugees was simply the right thing to do. They're trying to make compassion sound like weakness, Edmund said quietly. Meanwhile, in another wing of the castle, Cordelia was having her own private meeting. Lady Vivian Blackwood, wife of Lord Blackwood and one of Cordelia's few close allies, sat across from her in the ornate sitting room. "Are you certain this is the right approach?" Lady Vivian asked. "The people love Edmund and Catherine. If we move against them, there could be serious consequences." Cordelia's eyes flashed with determination. The people love them because they don't understand what real leadership requires. Edmund is too soft, too idealistic. He would bankrupt the kingdom with his generous policies and leave us vulnerable to our enemies. But what about the children? Isabella and Alexander are innocent in all this. "The children will be fine," Cordelia replied curtly. In fact, they might be better off with more structured guidance instead of Catherine's permissive approach. This comment revealed the deeper resentment that had been festering within Cordelia. She had never had children of her own, and watching Catherine raise Isabella and Alexander with such natural grace and affection was a constant reminder of what she had missed. As afternoon approached, the castle seemed to hold its breath. The emergency council meeting was scheduled for 3 o'clock, and everyone knew that the outcome could reshape the future of the entire kingdom. Isabella found herself drawn back to the east wing window where she had started her day. The morning mist had cleared, revealing a beautiful autumn landscape painted in brilliant reds and golds. But the beauty of the scene couldn't dispel the growing sense of unease that seemed to permeate every corner of the castle. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of the most challenging period her family would ever face. The royal council chamber felt heavier than usual as the afternoon meeting convened. The ancient oak table, polished to a mirror shine, reflected the faces of 12 council members, each carrying their own agenda and allegiances. Crown Prince Edmund entered with quiet dignity, followed closely by Sir James, while Queen Regent Cordelia took her place at the head of the table with an air of authority that seemed almost defiant. Lord Blackwood, a man whose family had served various monarchs for generations, stood to address the assembly. His weathered face bore the expression of someone about to deliver unpleasant news, though those who knew him well recognized the calculating gleam in his eyes. "We are gathered today to address serious concerns about the future direction of our kingdom," Lord Blackwood began, his voice carrying across the chamber with practiced authority. "There are questions about whether the current heir apparent possesses the judgment necessary to lead Eldoria through the challenges that lie ahead." Edmund maintained his composure, though inside he felt the familiar tightening in his chest that came with formal confrontations. He had always preferred honest discussion to political maneuvering, but he understood that today would require him to engage in the very games he despised. "I would like to hear these specific concerns," Edmund said calmly. "As the future king, I believe I have the right to understand exactly what issues are being raised." Cordelia leaned forward slightly, her voice smooth but carrying an undertone of steel. "The concerns are numerous, Edmund. Your recent policy proposals show a dangerous disregard for fiscal responsibility and national security." She gestured toward a stack of documents that had been prepared for the meeting. The education reform alone would cost the Treasury nearly 3 million crowns over 5 years. The environmental protection initiatives would severely limit our natural resource exports, damaging trade relationships that have sustained our economy for decades. "And the Refugee Assistance Program," added Lord Blackwood, "opens our borders to potential security risks while diverting resources from our own citizens." Edmund had anticipated these arguments and had prepared thorough responses. "The education investment will pay for itself within a decade through increased productivity and innovation. Our citizens deserve the best possible preparation for the future economy. He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the kingdom he hoped to serve. As for the environmental protections, we have a responsibility to preserve Eldoria's natural beauty and resources for future generations. Short-term profits should not come at the expense of long-term sustainability. And the refugees? Cordelia pressed, her voice gaining an edge. What about our responsibility to our own people first? Our responsibility is to act with honor and compassion, Edmund replied firmly. These are families fleeing violence and persecution. Helping them is not only morally right, it also strengthens our international relationships and demonstrates the values that Eldoria stands for. The debate continued for nearly an hour, with various council members expressing their opinions. Some supported Edmund's vision for a more progressive and compassionate kingdom, while others aligned with Cordelia's more traditional and conservative approach. During a brief recess, Sir James pulled Edmund aside in the hallway outside the council chamber. "The vote is going to be closer than we hoped," he whispered urgently. "Lord Blackwood has convinced more members than we expected." "What exactly are they proposing?" Edmund asked. "They want to invoke the Regency Extension Act. It's an old law that allows the council to extend a regency period if they believe the heir is not ready to assume full responsibility." Edmund felt his stomach drop. The Regency Extension Act had not been used in over 2 centuries, but it was technically still valid. If invoked, it would mean Cordelia could remain in power indefinitely, essentially blocking his path to the throne. Meanwhile, in the castle's family quarters, Catherine was trying to maintain normalcy for the children while dealing with her own anxiety about the meeting's outcome. Isabella had been asking pointed questions all day, demonstrating the perceptiveness that often surprised adults. "Mother, is someone trying to prevent father from becoming king?" Isabella asked as they sat in the family's private sitting room. Catherine paused her needlework and looked at her daughter thoughtfully. At 12, Isabella was old enough to understand basic political concepts, but Catherine wanted to be careful not to burden her with adult worries. "There are some people who disagree with your father's ideas about how to lead the kingdom," Catherine explained gently. "In any government, people sometimes have different opinions about what's best. But father would be a good king." Alexander chimed in from where he was building an elaborate castle with wooden blocks. "He always listens to people and tries to help them." "Yes, he would," Catherine agreed, "and that's exactly why some people support him so strongly." Isabella frowned, processing this information with the seriousness that characterized her personality. "What happens if the people who disagree with him win?" Catherine set down her needlework entirely and moved to sit closer to her children. "Then we'll face whatever comes together, as a family. Your father is strong and smart, and he has many people who believe in him." Back in the council chamber, the afternoon session had resumed with even more intensity. Cordelia had begun making more personal attacks on Edmund's character, suggesting that his compassionate policies were actually signs of weakness and poor judgment. "Leadership requires making difficult decisions," Cordelia declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "Sometimes that means saying no to popular but costly programs. Sometimes it means prioritizing our own citizens over foreign concerns. True leadership," Edmund responded, "means having the courage to do what's right even when it's not easy or popular. The policies I support aren't just compassionate, they're smart investments in our kingdom's future." The tension in the room was becoming palpable. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats as the debate became increasingly personal rather than political. Lord Ashford, an elderly member who had served the royal family for over 30 years, finally stood to speak. "I have watched this family through several generations," he said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "I knew Prince Edmund's grandmother, his mother, and his father. I have seen him grow from a thoughtful boy into a man who genuinely cares about the welfare of every citizen in this kingdom." He paused, looking directly at Cordelia before continuing. "I have also witnessed the transformation of our kingdom under different leadership styles. What I know is this: Eldoria has always been strongest when guided by empathy and wisdom rather than fear and tradition alone." The chamber fell silent as Lord Ashford's words sank in. His opinion carried enormous weight due to his long service and reputation for fairness. Cordelia's face tightened with barely contained anger. She had not expected such a direct challenge to her position, especially from someone as respected as Lord Ashford. "With respect, Lord Ashford," she said, her voice carefully controlled, "sentiment cannot replace practical governance. The challenges facing our kingdom require firm, decisive leadership, not idealistic experiments. And what challenges would those be, specifically? Our economy is stable, our relationships with neighboring kingdoms are strong, and our citizens enjoy more prosperity and freedom than ever before. The challenges," Cordelia replied sharply, "are the ones your policies would create. Financial instability from overspending, security risks from uncontrolled immigration, and economic damage from restricting our resource industries." The arguments continued as the afternoon wore on, but it was becoming clear that this was about more than just policy differences. This was a fundamental disagreement about what kind of kingdom Eldoria should become and who was best suited to lead it into the future. As evening approached, the council members began to show signs of fatigue, but no one wanted to be the first to suggest adjournment. Too much was at stake, and everyone understood that the decisions made in this room would affect not just the royal family, but every citizen of Eldoria. The real confrontation was still to come. As the council meeting stretched into the evening hours, word of the political crisis had spread beyond the castle walls. Citizens gathered in taverns and marketplaces throughout the capital city, discussing the rumors and speculating about what changes might be coming to their kingdom. Most expressed strong support for Crown Prince Edmund and Princess Catherine, but there were also whispers of concern about stability and continuity. Inside the castle, the atmosphere had grown increasingly tense. Servants went about their duties with unusual quiet efficiency, while guards maintained their posts with heightened alertness. Everyone could sense that something momentous was happening, even if they didn't know the specific details. Princess Isabella found herself unable to concentrate on her evening studies. She kept glancing toward the windows, wondering what was happening in that mysterious council meeting that had consumed the entire day. Her tutor, Miss Eleanor, noticed her distraction and gently suggested they end the session early. "Perhaps some fresh air would help clear your mind," Miss Eleanor suggested kindly. She had been with the family for 3 years and had grown quite fond of both children. Isabella nodded gratefully and made her way to the castle's rose garden, her favorite place for thinking. The autumn evening was crisp but pleasant, and the garden's carefully maintained pathways provided a peaceful retreat from the turmoil inside the castle. She wasn't surprised to find her mother already there, standing near the fountain that had been built to honor Isabella's grandmother, Queen Margaret. Catherine often came to this spot when she needed to think or find peace during difficult times. "Mother?" Isabella approached carefully, not wanting to disturb her if she needed solitude. Catherine turned with a warm smile that didn't quite hide the worry in her eyes. "Hello, sweetheart. I thought you might be studying with Miss Eleanor." "I couldn't focus," Isabella admitted, moving to stand beside her mother. "I keep thinking about Father and that meeting. Everyone seems so worried." Catherine put her arm around her daughter's shoulders, drawing her close. "You know, when I first joined this family, I was overwhelmed by how complicated everything could become. Your grandmother used to tell me that the hardest part about royal life wasn't the ceremonies or the public appearances. It was learning to trust that truth and goodness would eventually prevail." "Do you think they will this time?" Isabella asked, displaying the directness that was becoming one of her defining characteristics. "I think," Catherine said carefully, "that your father is one of the most honorable people I've ever known. He makes decisions based on what he believes is right, not on what's easy or popular. That's the kind of king Eldoria needs." Meanwhile, young Prince Alexander was in the castle's small observatory with Sir Thomas, the elderly astronomer who had been teaching him about the stars. Alexander's fascination with science and learning provided a welcome distraction from the day's tension. "Tell me about that constellation again," Alexander said, pointing toward a cluster of stars visible through the telescope. "That's Orion the Hunter," Sir Thomas explained patiently. According to ancient legends, he was known for his courage and determination in the face of great challenges. Alexander pondered this information with the seriousness that characterized both royal children. "Do you think Father is like Orion, facing challenges but staying determined?" Sir Thomas smiled at the boy's perceptiveness. "I think your father has many qualities of a great leader: courage, wisdom, and most importantly, genuine care for others. Back in the council chamber, the debate had reached a critical point. Lord Blackwood had formally presented a motion to invoke the Regency Extension Act, which would require a two-thirds majority vote to pass. The chamber was silent as each member contemplated the weight of their decision. "Before we vote," Edmund said, standing slowly, "I would like to address this council one final time." He looked around the table, making eye contact with each member as he spoke. "I understand that some of you have concerns about my readiness to lead. I want you to know that I don't take those concerns lightly." His voice was calm but filled with conviction. "However, I also want you to understand what kind of king I intend to be. I will not rule through fear or by maintaining the status quo simply because it's comfortable. I believe Eldoria can be a beacon of progress and compassion while remaining strong and prosperous. The education reforms I propose will create a generation of citizens who are better equipped to face the challenges of a changing world. The environmental protections will ensure that our children and grandchildren inherit a kingdom as beautiful and resource-rich as the one we know today." Edmund paused, his gaze settling on Cordelia for a moment before continuing. "And yes, I believe we have a moral obligation to help refugees and those in need. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. Because showing compassion to others ultimately makes us stronger, not weaker. I am not my father, and I am not my grandfather. I cannot be the king they were because I faced different challenges in a different time. But I can promise you this. Every decision I make will be guided by what I believe is best for the people of Eldoria, not what is best for my own comfort or power."
The chamber remained silent as Edmund returned to his seat.
Several council members exchanged glances, clearly moved by his words but still struggling with their decision. Cordelia stood to respond, her face flushed with barely controlled emotion. "Your Highness speaks beautifully about ideals and principles," she began, her voice tight with frustration. "But ideals don't balance budgets. Principles don't protect borders. Compassion doesn't prevent economic collapse." She began to pace around the table, her movements sharp and agitated. "I have served this kingdom faithfully for over 15 years. I married your father when he needed political stability. I have worked tirelessly to maintain the alliances and economic relationships that keep Eldoria secure." Her voice began to rise as years of suppressed resentment bubbled to the surface. "And now I am expected to simply step aside and watch everything I have helped build be dismantled by someone who thinks good intentions are enough to govern a kingdom." "Cordelia," Edmund said quietly, "no one is trying to dismantle anything you've built. I respect your service to this kingdom and to my father." "Respect?" Cordelia's voice cracked slightly. "If you respected my service, you would listen to my advice instead of dismissing it as old-fashioned conservatism." The emotion in her voice was becoming more apparent with each word. "Do you know what it's like to be constantly viewed as an outsider? To have every decision questioned because you weren't born into this family? To watch everyone wait eagerly for you to step aside so the real royals can take over?" The room was completely silent now, everyone recognizing that they were witnessing something far more personal than a political disagreement. Years of feeling marginalized and unappreciated were pouring out in a torrent of barely controlled anger. "I have given everything to this kingdom," Cordelia continued, her voice breaking slightly. "My youth, my own dreams, my chance for a family of my own. And for what? To be pushed aside the moment it becomes convenient?" Lord Ashford started to speak, but Cordelia turned on him with flashing eyes. "Don't you dare offer me empty consolations. You've all been waiting for this moment, haven't you? Waiting for Harold to die so you could get rid of the inconvenient stepmother who never quite fit in." The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. Even those who had supported Cordelia's position began to shift uncomfortably, recognizing that her pain was real even if they disagreed with her methods. Edmund felt a surge of unexpected sympathy for his stepmother. He had never fully understood how isolated and defensive she must have felt over the years. "Cordelia," he said gently, "I never wanted you to feel like an outsider. You are part of this family." "Am I?" she challenged, tears now visible in her eyes despite her efforts to maintain composure. "Then why wasn't I consulted about these policies that will reshape the kingdom? Why do I learn about major decisions from council meetings rather than family discussions?" The question revealed another layer of the conflict. This wasn't just about political differences. It was about feeling excluded from the family she had tried so hard to join. "You're right," Edmund admitted quietly. "I should have included you more in the decision-making process. That was my mistake." For a moment, the chamber seemed to hold its breath as Cordelia absorbed this unexpected acknowledgement. But the years of resentment and hurt weren't so easily healed by a single admission. "It's too late for apologies," she said, her voice hardening again. "The damage is done. This vote will determine whether Eldoria moves forward responsibly or careens toward disaster, under the guidance of someone who mistakes good intentions for wisdom." As the evening deepened, it became clear that this confrontation was about much more than policy or even power. It was about family, belonging, and the pain of feeling perpetually on the outside looking in. The vote that would determine the kingdom's future was about to begin. The tension in the council chamber had reached its peak as Lord Blackwood called for the formal vote on the Regency Extension Act. Each member would state their position publicly, and with 12 members present, at least 8 votes would be needed to invoke the extension that would keep Cordelia in power indefinitely. As the roll call began, Edmund felt his heart racing despite his outward calm. Everything he had worked toward, everything he believed about Eldoria's future, hung in the balance of the next few minutes. "Lord Blackwood?" the secretary called. "I vote in favor of the extension," Blackwood declared firmly. "Lady Blackwood?" "In favor." She echoed her husband's position. "Lord Ashford?" The elderly statesman stood slowly, his weathered hands gripping the edge of the table. "I have served this kingdom for over 30 years. In that time, I have seen that true strength comes not from rigid adherence to tradition, but from the courage to grow and adapt while maintaining our core values. I vote against the extension." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Ashford's vote had been expected by some, but the eloquence of his reasoning carried weight beyond just his single vote. The roll call continued with agonizing deliberation. Lord Pemberton voted in favor of the extension, citing concerns about fiscal responsibility. Lady Hartwell voted against it, expressing her belief in Edmund's vision for education reform. Sir Marcus Thompson voted in favor, while Dame Elizabeth Thornton voted against. As they reached the halfway point, the count stood at 4 votes for the extension and 4 votes against it. The remaining 4 votes would determine the outcome, and everyone in the room understood the magnitude of the moment. Sir Robert Fairfax? Sir Robert, a middle-aged man whose family had served the crown for generations, hesitated for a moment. "This is perhaps the most difficult decision I have ever faced as a member of this council," he began slowly. "Queen Regent Cordelia has served with dedication and skill. Her concerns about fiscal responsibility are valid and deserve serious consideration. However," he paused, looking directly at Edmund, "I believe that leadership requires not just prudence, but also vision and courage. I vote against the extension." The count was now 5 against and 4 in favor, but 3 crucial votes remained. Baroness Margaret Sinclair? The Baroness, a woman in her 50s who controlled significant agricultural lands in the northern provinces, had remained silent throughout most of the debate. "I have listened carefully to all arguments presented today," she said in a clear voice. "While I respect the Queen Regent's service and experience, I believe the future of our kingdom depends on our willingness to invest in our people and our values. The Crown Prince's policies may require short-term sacrifices, but they promise long-term benefits that far outweigh the costs. I vote against the extension." Now the count stood at 6 against and 4 in favor. Only 2 votes remained, and the extension would need both of them to succeed. Lord Victor Harrington? Lord Harrington was known for his careful, methodical approach to every decision. He had built his reputation on thorough analysis and measured responses. "This decision will affect not just the royal family, but every citizen of Eldoria," he began. "I have studied the Crown Prince's policy proposals extensively. While they do represent significant changes from our current approach, I believe they are based on sound reasoning and genuine care for our people's welfare. However," he paused and the chamber held its breath, "I also recognize Queen Regent Cordelia's years of faithful service and her legitimate concerns about the challenges ahead. This has been an extraordinarily difficult decision." The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. "I vote against the extension," Lord Harrington finally declared. A collective exhale filled the chamber. With 7 votes against the extension and only 1 vote remaining, the motion had failed. Edmund would become king as planned, but everyone understood that one final vote remained. Lady Catherine Morris? Lady Morris was the youngest member of the council, having inherited her position just 2 years earlier when her father passed away. She had remained almost completely silent throughout the day's proceedings, observing and learning from the more experienced members. "I am the newest member of this council," she began, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. "I have listened to arguments from people I deeply respect, people whose wisdom and experience far exceed my own." She looked around the table, making eye contact with each member. "What I have learned today is that governance is not just about policies and procedures. It's about trust, vision, and the courage to do what we believe is right even when it's difficult. Crown Prince Edmund has demonstrated all of these qualities. His policies may be ambitious, but they are based on careful study and genuine concern for our citizens' welfare. I vote against the extension." The final count stood at 8 votes against the extension and 4 in favor. The motion had failed decisively, but the division within the council was clear and concerning. Cordelia sat in stunned silence for several moments as the reality of the vote sank in. Years of planning and maneuvering had come to nothing. Her dream of maintaining her position and implementing her vision for the kingdom had been rejected by the very people she had tried to convince. "The motion fails," Lord Blackwood announced formally, though his voice lacked its usual commanding tone. "The regency will end as scheduled, and Crown Prince Edmund will assume the throne upon his 40th birthday." Edmund stood slowly, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. He had won the political battle, but he understood that the personal cost had been enormous for everyone involved, especially Cordelia. "Queen Regent Cordelia," he said formally, "I want to thank you for your years of service to this kingdom. Your dedication and hard work have not gone unnoticed or unappreciated." Cordelia looked up at him with eyes that showed both defeat and lingering resentment. "Your Majesty," she said, using his future title with obvious difficulty, "I hope your confidence in your policies proves to be well-founded. The people of Eldoria deserve nothing less than the best possible leadership." As the council members began to file out of the chamber, many paused to offer congratulations to Edmund or words of consolation to Cordelia. The political crisis had ended, but everyone understood that the personal relationships within the royal family would need time to heal. Sir James approached Edmund as the chamber emptied. "Congratulations, Your Majesty. You handled that with remarkable grace under pressure." "Thank you," Edmund replied, "but I can't help feeling that we've all lost something important today. Cordelia's pain is real, and her concerns about my policies deserve serious consideration." Meanwhile, in the Rose Garden, Catherine and Isabella had been joined by Alexander and several trusted family friends who had come to offer support during the difficult day. Word of the vote's outcome reached them quickly through Sir James's assistant. "Father won!" Alexander exclaimed, his 9-year-old understanding of the situation focused on the simple fact that his father would become king as expected. Isabella, with her more mature perspective, understood that the victory was more complicated. "Is Queen Cordelia very angry?" she asked her mother quietly. "She's hurt and disappointed," Catherine replied honestly. "Sometimes when people feel that way, it can come out as anger. We need to be understanding and try to help her heal." As the family prepared to reunite and discuss the day's events, they all understood that while the immediate crisis had passed, the work of rebuilding relationships and moving forward together would require patience, understanding, and genuine effort from everyone involved. The political battle was over, but the real challenge of healing the family was just beginning. 3 weeks after the dramatic council vote, Eldoria Castle had begun to settle into a new rhythm, though the underlying tensions were far from resolved. Crown Prince Edmund had officially begun the transition process that would culminate in his coronation in 8 months, but the emotional wounds from the confrontation remained raw and largely unaddressed. Princess Isabella had noticed that Queen Regent Cordelia rarely appeared at family meals anymore, choosing instead to take her breakfast in her private chambers and attending only the most formal dinners when protocol demanded her presence. The young princess found herself increasingly concerned about the pain she had witnessed in her step-grandmother's eyes during those rare encounters. It was Isabella who first suggested that the family needed to have a real conversation about what had happened and how to move forward. Her proposal came during a quiet evening when the four core family members were spending time together in their private sitting room, something that had become more precious since the crisis. Mother, father, Isabella began with the careful tone she used when addressing serious subjects. I think we need to talk to Queen Cordelia. Edmund looked up from the economic reports he had been reviewing while Catherine paused in her embroidery. Alexander continued building an elaborate fort with his wooden blocks, but they could tell he was listening intently. What do you mean, sweetheart? Edmund asked gently. She's been so sad since the council meeting, Isabella explained. I know she said things that hurt everyone's feelings, but I think she was hurting too. Maybe if we all talked together, we could understand each other better. Catherine exchanged a meaningful glance with her husband. Their daughter's emotional intelligence continued to amaze them both, and her suggestion revealed a maturity that was remarkable for someone her age. That's a very thoughtful idea, Catherine said carefully. But these kinds of conversations can be complicated. There are hurt feelings on all sides. I know, Isabella replied seriously. But we're supposed to be a family, and families should try to work things out, even when it's hard. Alexander looked up from his blocks with the directness that characterized his personality. I don't like it when people are sad in our house. It makes everything feel heavy. Edmund felt a surge of pride in both his children. Despite their young ages, they had grasped something that the adults had been struggling with: the importance of addressing problems directly, rather than allowing them to fester beneath the surface. You're both absolutely right, Edmund said, closing his reports and giving his children his full attention. We do need to have this conversation. The question is how to approach it in a way that helps everyone. Over the next few days, Catherine took the lead in reaching out to Cordelia. She understood that, as someone who had also married into the royal family, she might be able to bridge the gap between Cordelia's feelings of isolation and the family's desire for unity. Catherine found Cordelia in the castle's conservatory, tending to a collection of rare orchids that had been her passion for many years. The older woman was carefully adjusting the position of a particularly delicate bloom when Catherine approached. They're beautiful, Catherine said softly, not wanting to startle her. Cordelia looked up with surprise that quickly shifted to wariness. Thank you. They require constant attention, but they reward careful cultivation with extraordinary beauty. The metaphor was not lost on Catherine, who recognized that Cordelia was speaking about more than just flowers. I imagine it takes great patience to develop that kind of expertise. Patience, dedication, and the willingness to learn from mistakes, Cordelia replied, her voice carrying an undertone of meaning beyond horticulture. Catherine moved closer to examine one of the orchids, using the action to create a natural pause in the conversation. Cordelia, I was wondering if you might be willing to join us for a family dinner this weekend. Nothing formal, just us and the children. The invitation hung in the air between them like a delicate bridge that could either connect or collapse depending on how it was received. I'm not sure that would be wise, Cordelia said carefully. The children were present for enough conflict already. They don't need to witness any more family drama. Actually, Catherine said gently, Isabella was the one who suggested we all talk together. She's concerned about you and wants the family to heal. The surprise that flickered across Cordelia's face was quickly replaced by something softer, perhaps touched by the idea that the child she had often felt judged by was actually worried about her well-being. The children are more perceptive than we sometimes give them credit for, Catherine continued. They understand that families go through difficult times, but they also believe that families should work together to solve their problems. Cordelia was quiet for several minutes, focusing intently on her orchids while processing the invitation. What would Edmund expect from such a conversation? She finally asked. I think he would want the same thing we all want: honesty, understanding, and a path forward that works for everyone. That Saturday evening, the family gathered in the smaller dining room that had become their preferred space for intimate meals. The atmosphere was initially strained, with everyone speaking carefully and focusing perhaps too intently on the excellent roast beef and seasonal vegetables. It was Alexander who broke the ice with his characteristic directness. Queen Cordelia, are you still angry at father? The question was so innocent and straightforward that it cut through all the adult complications and got to the heart of the matter. Cordelia set down her fork and looked at the young prince thoughtfully. "No, Alexander, I'm not angry at your father. I was hurt and scared, and sometimes those feelings can look like anger." "What were you scared of?" Isabella asked with genuine curiosity. "I was scared of not being important anymore," Cordelia answered honestly, "of feeling like I didn't belong in this family that I've tried so hard to be part of." Edmund felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Cordelia, you do belong. You always have. I'm sorry if my actions made you feel otherwise." "Your policies," Cordelia said carefully. "They represent such significant changes from the way we've always done things. I worried that they would create problems we weren't prepared to handle." "But what if they create good changes?" Isabella asked thoughtfully. "Like the new schools that would help children learn more, or the help for families who had to leave their homes because of the war." Cordelia looked at the earnest young face and felt something shift inside her. "You really believe these changes would help people?" "I do," Isabella said simply. "And if they don't work the way Father hopes, then we can try different things. That's what families do. They try things together and help each other when something doesn't work." The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, with moments of tension balanced by genuine attempts at understanding. Catherine shared her own experience of feeling like an outsider when she first joined the royal family, helping Cordelia understand that her feelings were not unique or invalid. Edmund acknowledged that he should have involved Cordelia more in the policy development process, not just as a political courtesy but because her experience and perspective were valuable. Cordelia, in turn, admitted that her fear of change had sometimes prevented her from fully considering the potential benefits of new approaches. By the end of the evening, they had not solved all their problems or erased all the hurt feelings, but they had taken the first crucial steps toward rebuilding their relationships. More importantly, they had done so as a family, with the children's wisdom and honesty helping the adults remember what really mattered. "I have a proposal," Edmund said as the evening wound down. "I would like Cordelia to serve as my senior advisor during the transition period. Your experience with the council and your understanding of palace politics would be invaluable." Cordelia's eyes filled with tears, the first sign of genuine emotion she had shown in weeks. "You would trust me with that responsibility after everything that's happened?" "I would trust you because of everything that's happened," Edmund replied. "You care deeply about this kingdom, even if we sometimes disagree about the best ways to serve it." Isabella reached across the table and took Cordelia's hand. "Does this mean our family is going to be okay?" Cordelia squeezed the young girl's hand gently. "I think it means we're going to work very hard to make sure it is." As the family said their goodnights and went to their respective chambers, there was a sense of cautious optimism that had been missing for weeks. The path forward would not be easy, and there would undoubtedly be more challenges ahead, but they had proven to themselves that they could face difficulties together, rather than allowing them to drive them apart. The kingdom of Eldoria would soon have a new king, but more importantly, the royal family had rediscovered the bonds that made them truly strong, not just their titles or their power, but their commitment to each other and their shared responsibility to serve their people with wisdom, compassion, and unity. In the end, it had taken the honest questions of children and the willingness of adults to be vulnerable with each other to transform a political crisis into an opportunity for growth and healing. The royal family had learned that true strength came not from avoiding conflict, but from facing it together with open hearts and minds. The future of Eldoria looked brighter because its leaders had remembered that they were, first and foremost, a family.